And welcome back to the European Commission in Brussels for the second part of Talking Europe. My guest today holds one of the most influential positions in the Commission. Joaquín Almunia is the EU Commissioner in charge of competition. As the EU's antitrust regulator, his mission is to guarantee fair commercial competition across the Union. Needless to say that his rulings can have a big impact on business. Mr. Almunia, thank you for being our guest and welcome to our show.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
I add that you are from Spain. You held several ministerial positions in the government of Mr. Felipe González at the time. And we'll start with a story that has grabbed headlines in recent days. You must rule in the coming weeks on the possible merger of Deutsche Boerse and NYSE Euronext. That would create the world's largest exchange operator. But you have raised concerns about the deal, arguing that it would give the new entity a monopolistic position in Europe. Do you intend to rule against this merger?
Well, it's a collegial decision that will be adopted by the College of Commissioners under my proposal next 1st of February. We have been analyzing this merger during the last year. It was presented for the first time to me in February 2011 and formally was notified in August 2011. We see that this proposed merger will create a big single institution for on-exchange traded derivatives with more than 90% of the total trade on derivatives in the European market. That is the relevant one. So obviously for an antitrust regulator this creates a lot of concerns.
So there is a problem there in your view, but do you understand the position of the supporters of the merger who tell you, look, this is a unique opportunity for Europe to strengthen its position on the world at a time where trading activity in the emerging countries is increasing?
Well, I see the relevant market as a European one. If a European company wants to trade derivatives in the US with US dollar underlying, they will go to the US. If they want in Asia, they will want to go to Asia. Here in Europe, that is a relevant market, we see a very, very high concentration of the business in one single institution if this merger goes on. So these are the reasons for my concern.
So you don't agree that this is a unique opportunity for Europe to establish itself in the world?
Well,
and say...
It's a little bit paradoxical that this kind of argument is being used by New York Stock Exchange. No?
Okay, I see what you mean. Now, another big case you're handling is the issue of credit and debit card fees. The Commission wants to reduce the cost for customers. Is it to say that we are paying too much to our banks when we use our credit cards?
Well, right now we have two cases open, two procedures, one against MasterCard and the other one against Visa Europe. The MasterCard case is before the European Court of Justice. We decided and we reached an agreement on commitments to reduce the fees, what we call in a technical way the multilateral interchange fees, the MEPs. And in the case of Visa Europe, we reached a partial agreement and the other part of the investigation is still open, but is needed to establish the fair rules for competition in this market. That is very important. All of us, we are using very often debit cards or credit cards. There is a lack of transparency. There are too many big operators in the market, so we need to look very carefully. And on top of the antitrust investigations and cases, with my colleague Michel Barnier here in the Commission, we are wondering about the possibility to establish regulation on this, as the US did, by the way.
But very briefly, your feeling is that at the moment banks are overcharging customers?
Well, in some cases, yes.
Let's move to another story. This week, the Commission warned the Hungarian government that it would face legal action unless it modified new laws that undermine the independence of the National Central Bank and threatened to tip the country towards authoritarianism. Must the Commission take the government of Mr. Orbán to court?
Well, on the one hand, we have opened and we are analyzing if we will open some infringement procedures on the new law about the central bank in Hungary, or about the data protection, or about the independence of the judiciary, or about many other, or some other things. But on top of these particular infringements, that taken single one, you can compare that exists a similar infringement in another country. The fact that so large number of infringements in very important areas are being opened at the same time suggested that maybe more general analysis is needed, and we, as Commission, we have the responsibility to look into this to see if the democratic system as such and the democratic controls that are required for the good functioning of a democracy are in place in Hungary.
And that could imply taking Hungary to court if you think it's needed.
So far we have decided to look into these problems in detail and to look very carefully. We are prudent, we are not anticipating conclusions, but we are worried at the same time.
Now let's talk about the euro. There was a little celebration on January 1st when the euro turned 10 years old. Euro's battered single currency is fighting for survival, and EU officials have warned of a tough year ahead. We're going to talk about all this in a moment, but first let's have a look at our report. What has 2012 in store for the single currency? Shiri Sidbun reports.
When the euro was launched 10 years ago, this is how people reacted. Now that the single currency marked its 10th anniversary, nobody celebrated. The euro is at risk. 2012 started with a warning from the Greek government.
They must sign the bailout agreement, otherwise Greece will be out of the markets and the euro.
Only a year ago, the idea that a country would leave the euro seemed impossible. Now Greece is at the front door. Italy, Spain and Portugal are struggling. This although Europe mobilized unprecedented efforts to end the debt crisis. The bloc held 8 summits last year and paved the way for a new fiscal treaty aiming to coordinate budgets. Europe will now force member states to follow the rules. Otherwise, they could now be sanctioned. But some economists say this is no solution to the crisis that's eating up Europe.
The euro will have no future unless we take new measures, which would have immediate effect, and unless we implement important decisions EU leaders have already made.
But are European leaders capable of saving the currency? Economist Jacques Sapir says they lack vision and courage.
European leaders put patches to solve problems. But today, we ran out of patches and we're facing a very serious crisis.
Eurozone leaders will meet again on the 30th of January. They will try to rework their plan to save the bloc and its currency.
Mr. Almunia, according to several sources, France's debt has been downgraded. Its much-cherished AAA has been downgraded. Surely, as the second largest economy in the Eurozone, this is very bad news for the Eurozone and for the future of the euro as such.
Well, I will not comment on rumors. In any case, we know that in many economies of the euro area there are problems at the different level. The most difficult ones are the Greek problems indeed. 2 other members of the euro area are under a financial assistance program, Ireland and Portugal. Other countries are making a lot of adjustments because they need it. Others have difficulties to get access to the capital markets. In any case, during the financial crisis, the problems had increased, and because of the bad functioning of some parts of the economic and monetary union, these problems have been aggravated, and we need to tackle these problems with a common approach. I think we had adopted in the past year and a half or a couple of years very important decisions in this regard, but still we need to step up our common action to overcome the difficulties and to find a way that the economic and monetary union will help us to overcome the national problems and not to aggravate the problems.
And Joaquín Almunia, as we heard in our report, the economists there were saying the problem is that Europe so far has lacked leadership. EU leaders will meet at the end of the month to discuss the so-called Fiscal Pact. The idea is to strengthen budget discipline across the Eurozone to avoid the mistakes of the past. But do you think this will be enough to reassure the markets and to reassure investors?
Well, fiscal discipline and fiscal consolidation in most of our economies is a must, is a necessary condition to overcome the crisis, to create the conditions to open a new period of growth, sustainable growth, employment creation. But of course, this is not enough. A necessary condition is not a sufficient one. Beyond fiscal consolidation, that is of the essence, we need structural reforms to increase the dynamism of our economies, to increase productivity, to be more competitive, and we need the creation of the general conditions for growth that are not only coming from the fiscal side or from the structural reform side. We need a good functioning of the financial system, of the banking system, credit flowing towards the real economy, and we need demand. So all these things are needed at the same time. It's about leadership, yes, but it's also about political will and the capacity to convince all the economic and social agents, and not only governments, that these actions are needed and are needed at the same time and in a coherent way.
Let's talk about your country of origin, Spain. The new Prime Minister, the Conservative Mariano Rajoy, has vowed to cut the deficit, to bring it down from 8% down to 4.4%. This will require unprecedented austerity measures. Is he the man Spain needs to put the country back on track?
Well, what Spain needs is to comply with the commitment to adjust the deficit this year in 4.4% of GDP, and next year, 2013, to 3% of the GDP. This is a question of credibility, it's a question of adjusting our imbalances in Spain, it's a question of creating conditions for growth, again, for the creation of employment, it's a question of trust. If you don't have trust vis-à-vis the financial markets, you will not get the financial resources needed to finance growth.
But you
to
were
finance
talking
employment.
earlier about the need to stimulate growth. Now, the cost of these austerity measures, bringing deficit down from 8% to 4.4%, is estimated at 40 billion euros. In your country of origin, you've got unemployment standing at 23%, recession looming. Surely austerity will make things even worse.
Well, but the question is what should be done and what is the order to do the things that are needed. If you have a big fiscal imbalance, as this 8% public deficit, that this seems to be the final figure for 2011, you cannot get good conditions for growth and for the creation of employment through growth if you are not able to adjust your fiscal position. Because if you are not able to put public debt levels on a sustainable path, you will not get confidence to finance your real economic activity or to get a sustainable path for the correction of the imbalances in your financial sector. So many things should be done to overcome a crisis such as this one. Some of the reforms or adjustments needed are very tough, and it's very important politically and economically to do it in the right order. If you don't put order in your public finances, you will not be able to reach other goals, other objectives.
Spanish will tell you unemployment stands at 23%. When you look at youth unemployment, this is twice as much. What can the government in Spain, what can Europe do to tackle this problem?
Well, it's a good question for the Spanish government, but what we from Brussels are analyzing and what we are recommending the Spanish government, the previous one and this one, is please don't think that you will get growth and employment without putting order in your public finances. It's not the only thing you should do, it's not the only policy you should develop, but without these tough decisions, you will not get the positive results.
And one last question, a more philosophical one about your portfolio competition. As Europe is going through the most severe crisis since the end of the Second World War, many Europeans are starting to wonder whether we haven't opened up our economies too much, whether we are strong enough to compete with China, because the rules aren't the same in China, the rules aren't the same even in Brazil. What is your view on that?
Well, I am an economist by formation, and I remember very well reading the economic history of the past century, of the 20th century, which were the big errors on those who were in power during the 30s of the 20th century, dealing with the previous big financial crisis. And they tried to protect themselves through protectionist measures. And this would be a disaster. This was a disaster in the 20th century. This would be a disaster if we do the same in this century. The question is not to protect us closing the economies or increasing the barriers and the walls to protect us against the others. What we need is to strengthen the economic links with the others, to strengthen our economic links with economies such as the Chinese one, that is growing at a path of 10% every year, or other emerging economies growing at 8%, 7%. We need to use this leverage, and we need to increase and to deepen our economic relations with them. They have a big market, a very quickly growing market, huge opportunities, and they have, as is the case in China, even capital. They can be the investors we are looking in some areas. Of course, we cannot open our borders without asking them to do the same.
But it's very hard to convince the Chinese about reciprocity. It's very hard to tell them they have to apply the same rules as we do.
It's very hard to negotiate with the Chinese or with the Brazilians or with the Indians. As they say, it's very difficult and very tough to negotiate with the Europeans or with the Americans. But we don't win this battle. We don't overcome our problems if we try to solve our problems against all the others. This is not possible anymore. We need to try to solve our problems helping each other and asking them to help us. This cooperation, these positive economic relations will give us the real solution and will open to us and to our children the real big opportunities of this century.
Joaquín Almunia, EU Commissioner in charge of competition. We'll have to leave it there as we are running out of time, but thank you very much indeed for taking part in our edition of Talking Europe.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for watching. Our programme will return, of course, in 2 weeks on France 24. And meanwhile, please stay tuned for more news on our channel.